Howdy, it's Jimarato, and wanted to again continue with a little theme I've had going on here lately with the Amish in the Sugarcreek, Ohio, in the Sugarcreek, Ohio area. And this is actually us pulling out of Park Street Pizza in Sugarcreek, Ohio, which is an incredibly good pizza place. We saw a lot of Amish here and a lot of non-Amish. Just a popular place in the area for locals, and it's a tad bit off the tourist track. I don't think the tourists have discovered it yet, but this is just a really nice pizza place. I got a small pepperoni for $8, tax included, I believe, with a little cup of garlic butter, and it was so good. But these guys, it's a family-owned business. It's local, and it was just hopping. It was super busy, and the staff was nice, and it was just another one of the many treats in this area to check out. But this video, I think I've got close to an hour's worth of video of us just kind of driving around Amish country. I kind of enjoyed doing this, just driving around almost aimlessly, looking to see what's around. And I've done this all through Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio. And this is just a great area for that sort of thing. I just love this rural part of Ohio. This isn't too horribly far from Akron and Cleveland. I think I've mentioned before we lived in Cleveland for about a decade, and it's very urban, as anybody knows, and it was always a treat to come down to this area and just drive around. But this is just mostly us driving around Sugarcreek. I believe Berlin. There's probably some of Walnut Creek in here. Some little towns I'm not real sure of. And I've got to apologize. We drove through a swarm of bugs at one point on this trip, and we could never get the windshield clean after that. Yeah, some of the videos flawed because of that, but I still think it's interesting. I enjoy driving around looking through a windshield, even if it's a little dirty. So if that bothers you, feel free to not watch. This is us mostly driving around Amish country. I thought I would mention just a few things about the Amish and about this area, because I really, really, really like this area in general. I just think it's really pretty, and my wife and I have talked about retiring here at some point. We like it a lot. In fact, I know as we were driving up here on the right, there was a open house sign in front of a house. Yeah, I think that might be it right there. We very, very briefly toyed with stopping to check it out. We know that's a while off before we could think about actually moving out to a place like this, or possibly Berea, or one of the other places we've talked about retiring. But this would be a nice place to retire. And there's some nice rural spots, and you can still find property at a reasonable price. So that's something we've talked about here and there. I wanted to mention a couple of books while we're on Amish country. As I always like to mention a book. A few years ago, I picked up the book A History of the Amish by Stephen M. Nolt. The Amish are always a curious group. There's kind of some myth and mythology around those guys. A lot of it probably not really deserved, but they are an interesting people. And I bought this book. It's about a 300-page book. The copy I bought from goodbooks.com, it's got a $9.95 cover price, and it's about 300. It's over 300 pages, and it's very thorough. It's very well researched, and this is just a good value. This is, if you're curious about the Amish, this is the book to start out with. And again, I read it several years ago. It's a book that I'm sure I'm going to read again at some point, just because I remember I enjoyed it. It's big, though. There's a lot going on with this book, but Nolt's writing style is really good, and it's easy to follow along with what he's trying to tell you. And this really covers the Amish thoroughly. Going back several hundred years, they've been around since I believe the early 1700s. Just an interesting break-off group. And then there have been various splits among the Amish, and some of those groups have reconnected later on. But there have been some breakups and some split ups, and just interesting history. Their humbleness and their way of there's a nice little buggy. I waved at those guys, they waved back. I thought that was really sweet. I gave them the old Western Kentucky I'm driving, but waving a couple fingers at them, and they waved back. So I thought that was really sweet. But yeah, the history of the Amish really covers geographically and philosophically a lot about the Amish, and I like this book a lot. And I just remember thinking, this is a thorough book. And in fact, as I'm kind of flipping through it right now, I'm itching to reread it, but I've got a ton of other books on my on-deck shelf to read. But yeah, this was just a really good book, and I can't recommend it highly enough. Very, very interesting. Also, my wife, as I mentioned, kind of grew up in this Ohio Valley area. Well, but part of that kind of region of Ohio. And she and her family grew up a little bit in Mesopotamia, Ohio, which we don't visit at all on this particular trip. It's a good ways off from where we're at right now. But Mesopotamia is a really cute little community, maybe 20 miles outside to the east of Cleveland. And that was always a fun road trip on a Saturday or even on an afternoon. Some scenery, you get some scenery like this. And the main little area of Mesopotamia goes around the commons. It's like a big oval with houses surrounding that oval. Then there's a big common ground area in the middle. And they would have festivals there. Around July 4th, they always have the ox roast. And that's a lot of fun. We would do that quite a bit. But it's a very Amish area. There's a great little general store there called the End of the Commons. And my wife actually worked there for a brief period of time. And a really sweet family, the Shadens, own that store. And they take a lot of pride in what they do. Nice people in the community. I've always admired them and their work ethic and what they're doing. But at the End of the Commons is a general food, penny candy kind of place that you can go and get just about anything you need there, and it's very old timey, it's very retro-ish, and they've kept that place up really well and kept a tradition going for multiple generations within their family of running that store, and it's impressive. And I'm sure at some point I'll get back out there and try to make some videos, but it's a really nice little community. But my wife and her family dealt a lot with the Amish out there and became pretty friendly with some of them. So she knows a lot about the Amish. Of course, different groups of Amish have different beliefs. It's hard to generalize the Amish, and of course it's always bad to stereotype. But there are certain stereotypes about the Amish that I've noticed that I think it's okay to repeat some of them. It's there's the stereotype that they're hardworking and they take pride in what they do, and I have seen that to be true. When I've been in these areas, they do seem to to care about doing a good quality job. In fact, I was just thinking, I own 3 belts right now, all made by a guy named Eli Miller out of Mesopotamia, Ohio, and I've had at least a couple of them for over 2 decades. Not to date myself or give away my age, but yeah, those were early gifts that my wife got for me, and those belts are still, they really stand up. They're made well. And after the first couple stood up so well, I asked her for another one, and she got me another one. I don't believe Eli Miller is still making belts. It's been a while since I've bumped into him. But he actually lived fairly close to that End of the Commons grocery store, and he had like a little shop there out of his house, basically. We stopped by and saw him. It's been a few years, and I think he was retiring from belt making and that sort of thing. But yeah, they have a well-deserved reputation for caring about quality. I know a lot has been mentioned about Rumspringa, the period where the Amish kids can kind of go out and experience the world a little bit and make up their mind about whether or not they want to remain Amish or leave the Amish faith. I've always observed, kids are kids no matter where they're from or how they're brought up. 12, 13, 14-year-old kids are going to be rebellious, and the Amish are no different. They're eager to go out and have fun and experience life and see what's out there. And, I say this just neutrally, I guess, but they know how to party. I've seen some Amish having a good time. More power to them. I'm all for people having a good time, but they know how to have a good time. But the older Amish I've talked to seem very disciplined and very focused. That's interesting. We drove down to this area. We heard this little ice cream and burger shop. I think they serve burgers. We heard this little independent place was really good. So we drove out here, but they were doing a hopping business. And on most nights, it might have been nice to kind of set out and mingle with the locals. Order some food, but it was just really, really... they had a line going, and it was obvious it was going to take a little while to order. So we ended up driving down the road. But it still seemed like a nice little place, and we'll definitely have to get back there at some point. It was just looked nice, but it was crowded, so we drove on down the road and just literally drove around for the heck of it, like I mentioned. A couple other things that I was thinking about as far as Amish country go and that sort of thing. There is the Amish and Mennonite Heritage Center, which is in Millersburg, Ohio. And we went there, it's been a couple years ago now. They have a really cool cyclorama. I don't know if you're familiar with what a cyclorama is, but it's a painting that basically goes around in a circular shape in a room, and basically you're surrounded by the entire painting. The most famous one is in Gettysburg. There's a huge painting of the Battle of Gettysburg that's in a room, and I believe that one's 40 feet tall, and it really overwhelms you. But at the Amish and Mennonite Heritage Center, they have it's 10 foot by 265 foot, and it's a cyclorama showing basically the history of the Amish. And it's very artsy. It's not a realistic one like they do in Gettysburg. The one in Gettysburg, you're surrounded and you almost feel like you're right in the middle of the battle. And that was how that one was painted, to sort of make you feel like you were right in the middle of it. But this one is more just a history of the Amish. It is really well done. They don't allow photography inside, but they do sell postcards and some small prints of parts of the cyclorama, and I thought that was really cool. And a man named Heinz Gagel, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right, did it. And I'm pretty sure he was actually Catholic, but he felt that the history of the Amish needed to be done. While we were at the Amish and Mennonite Heritage Center, I asked if... Well, I saw like the exit sign in the door, and I thought, well, obviously, he painted the cyclorama, then they brought it in pieces or something like that. But then I was told, no, the cyclorama was actually painted in that room. So they didn't remove part of the painting or anything like that, for the sake of putting the exit sign up. It's complete when you look at it. And I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, that Heritage Center is a really cool place. They also have a tour of a barn, and I believe a schoolhouse. There's a little display. We went mostly just to see the Cyclorama. But yeah, they give you a tour of it, and it's just really interesting because they paint a lot of the significant moments of the faith's history into the painting. And a fella named Lester Beachy was at the visitor center the day we were, and he actually gave us a tour, and it was really informative and just interesting because, I mean, there's a lot going on within the painting, and you should just that's if you're going up there for your first time, check that out. It's in Millersburg, and also Lester Beachy wrote a book, and we bought that while we were there, called Our Amish Values: Who We Are and What We Believe. And it's a simple book that just kind of talks about the Amish. There's a little picture corresponding with the various values. Unlike the book I mentioned earlier, A History of the Amish, this is a much more it's a smaller book. It's something even probably an elementary school kid could read and get something out of. But I thought that was pretty neat that he had a really nice hardback book there that he was selling, and we picked that up too. And they also sold baskets that Amish children had made, and they had signed the bottom of the baskets. And I think that's really, I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. We bought a basket while we were there too. The Amish and Mennonite Heritage Center was just a really neat place to stop, and that was on an earlier trip. We haven't been back there in a while. I'm sure we'll go back at some point though. Another place that we've been to as we've toured around and roamed around Amish country and you might notice we were driving, and then we turned around and just went the other way, so you might be seeing some of the same scenery just in reverse here. We decided to go back towards Berlin, and my wife realized there was a really scenic route to take to get back to Berlin. But there is another place we've been to, the Yoder Amish home, and that's in Millersburg. And we've actually been there 2 or 3 times. And it's basically a tour an Amish home and see what an Amish home is like. And it's an old home. It's funny, there was a young lady that gave us our tour last time, and she was very nice. And as we talked to her, she had lived in Mesopotamia, Ohio at some point, and my wife knew some of her family. And that was pretty cool. And there was also a young lady in the gift shop who had written a cookbook. Actually, we found just a little cookbook there at the gift shop, and we thought, well, this is really nice. And we went to pay for it, and the girl at the cash register was like, oh yeah, this is I put this together with my grandma. So we had her sign that cookbook. But it's that's kind of a hop in place, the Yoder Amish home. And they tour you through a home, and then you can also take a little buggy ride. And they have an Amish school too, so you can kind of sit in an Amish school and know what that's like. They have a teacher, like an actual Amish teacher, who's there and answers your questions about how Amish school is. The Amish go to school up until the 8th grade, and then they're finished, and then they're on with working and doing what they want to do in the world. That's they obviously look at things in a different way. I think past the 8th grade, they kind of feel like education is, just not necessary. And you can read up more on that. You can just Google it. There's a ton of information out there about that. But the teacher we talked to the day we were there, she was very nice. And she told us that they are allowed to spank children at the school. But the fact that they're able to, the fact that they have that authority, pretty much means that they very rarely have to use it. Just the threat that they can do that kind of keeps the kids in line. She also told us that, if a teacher has to miss for a few days, if there's a family member that's sick, or if there's a death in the family, another substitute will come in and help. Sometimes, especially if they're a close friend or whatever, the teacher that misses school does not get paid for those days. But the substitute, possibly as a favor, might say, you know what, go ahead and pay that teacher the money that they missed just to help them out with that situation. And I think that's that's something else I get from the Amish. They're very family and community oriented. Obviously, I mean you can just kind of look at them and see that. And again, as we're driving down the road, I've got to apologize for how dirty the windshield was this particular day, but still, you get a feel of what's going on there. We were at another spot at another time in Amish country, and I remember a younger Amish lady was talking to an older Amish man, and it sounded like she was in a domestic situation that wasn't the most ideal. I was sitting in a restaurant, and I overheard their conversation. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I just overheard it. They were trying to keep quiet too. They weren't trying to advertise what they were doing or anything like that. They obviously they weren't into the drama. But the older Amish man, was very, very thoughtful, very helpful with the advice he gave to her. He was talking to her about, she could go here, she could do this, she could do that, she could come to his house. There were other families that would help her. It was very sweet, and it was obviously very, just again, very thoughtful, very helpful. There was just something very sweet about that whole conversation. It gave me more admiration for the Amish. Anyway, for what that's worth. Another thing I wanted to mention, going back to Sugarcreek, just, the little, it's hard to say downtown Sugarcreek, but down by where the world's largest cuckoo clock is, and I mentioned that in another video, and if I haven't already, I'm going to post another video that has the world's largest cuckoo clock in it. But in that area, that's an area that I just love. There's just a few blocks of little shops that are just nice and cozy. And I know I've mentioned before on another video too, the Christian bookshop down there. Yeah, the gospel shop. We were there, and we found some books. My mother-in-law likes Christian fiction books. Some Christian historic fiction, and pretty much she only reads stuff that's Christian and very, very heavily Christian. So when we stop somewhere like that, we always look for some books for her, and we'll even call her up and see if she's read some of the books we find. But we found several books there for her. And that's not the kind of book I like to read in general. But, I mentioned the Sugarcreek Amish Mysteries. I've read some of those after my mother-in-law read them, just because they're Amish and related to Sugarcreek. But at the gospel shop, I was flipping through a book, and it was kind of a historic fiction Civil War book. And it was only like $12 or something, but I passed on it just because I've got so many books I'm trying to get to. And after we got home, I really regretted it. It was one of those things like, yeah, I should have picked that book up. Anyway, we called them up. We called up the gospel shop and asked them if they could ship that book to us, and they did. And I think they only charged us a couple, like $2 or something shipping. It was something ridiculously cheap. Yeah, wanted to mention them, and that's a nice little shop. They have all sorts of greeting cards and T-shirts. A little bit more, little more stock in it than a lot of other similar shops. And it's right there in Sugarcreek, so that was really cool. And we like that place a lot. There used to be a little Amish fella, who would drive a tractor and a wagon around. He would basically, it was a tourist thing. Like, he had several stops, and you could get on his wagon, his horse-drawn wagon with, I'm trying to think of a way to describe it. It kind of reminded me of the old hay rides we used to do when we were kids, but the wagon part had more kind of like bench seats in it, and it was more secure. You'd have to jump off that thing to fall off. I mean, nobody was going to fall off that wagon. And of course, he didn't exactly have a tractor. He had kind of a horse-drawn carriage kind of thing. Basically, he drove the wagon, and then probably 20, 30 people could get on that wagon and he'd ride them around Sugarcreek for however long, and he would tell you about the Amish. He'd tell you about Sugarcreek, and he was just a friendly little fella. And he did that. I know. We went on a ride with him at least 3 or 4 times over the years. Just a real nice guy, and he had a donation bucket. He didn't charge a specific price. You didn't buy a ticket. He just had like a little bottle jar kind of bucket thing, that you could put tips in. I know we always tipped him, at least a $20 or something every time we did it. It was definitely worth that. And if you went somewhere else, you'd be paying a whole lot more for something similar. Hopefully everybody else was generous with him too. He used to be in Sugarcreek, and then we were there, I want to say a couple of years ago, and we saw basically that wagon with the for sale sign on it. So obviously he's not doing it anymore. I thought somebody else would start doing that though, because, I feel like there's a market for that. Yeah, that guy was really nice. It was just a cool thing to do. It was a cool thing to ride around in a wagon like that around Sugarcreek, and it was a great way to see the area. And he went by the world's largest cuckoo clock, and then he would take you out a little more and take you out by some homes, and there was a produce stand that he would take you to. And I remember we bought some. I think they even had flowers and produce and that kind of stuff. But it was a neat little thing to do. Yeah, and as we're driving around here, I'm sure you're starting to see some Amish homes, and this is just pretty. I mean, I could drive around and do this forever. In fact, I'll retire one day in an area like this and plan on doing that. But yeah, so there was a little guy in Sugarcreek that used to drive around a wagon, and it was just a lot of fun. If anybody knows what happened, why he quit, or if anybody else is going to start doing that, let me know, because that was just really, really cool. And I mentioned we usually come up here. I think of Sugarcreek and Walnut Creek. Really, everything Berlin, everything you're seeing kind of is the same area. I think of it as just, kind of all connected and all similar. And we always stay at the Carlisle Inn in Walnut Creek, and that's a comfy little hotel, and it has kind of a traditional feel. Very it's not a rowdy hotel. It's mostly people that want to come and explore Amish country stay at the Carlisle Inn in Walnut Creek, and we like that a lot. And they always have, you always have a good room and stuff, but they have balconies overlooking, the kind of main road in town, and you can sit and watch, cars, buggies, bicycles go by. And we like that area, and there's a lot to do right there in Walnut Creek too. There's Rebecca's Bistro, which is one of our favorite restaurants in this area. Not quite traditionally Amish, though I've noticed a lot of Amish people in there, but they have a really good Cuban sandwich that I have to get every time I go. And it's right by the Der Dutchman restaurant, which, they're obviously going for a very Amish theme with that. And I've seen a lot of Amish people working in there, and they do have good food. It's just a nice place to go. It's one of those, on your first trip, you've got to go there, but don't ignore Rebecca's Bistro right next door. That is probably our favorite place to go. We went with some friends, though. Again, this has been several years ago. We went with another couple up and stayed at the Carlisle Inn. And we went to Der Dutchman. We noticed a table of a big family of Amish people. Mom, dad, some older kids, some younger kids. Must have been 10 or more of them at the table, and then right next to them was what you would call a Yankee family, you and me, the rest of non-Amish. There was a family of non-Amish beside them that was just about as big, and there was such a difference, and it was so noticeable. I think everybody in the restaurant could notice. The Amish family sat there, minded their manners, enjoyed their food, and they were very calm and peaceful. Whereas the other family, the kids were literally running around the table and throwing things and being loud and screaming and all that good stuff. And it was just a world of difference between the two families. It was just an observation. I'm not trying to make anything out of that, but it was just an observation. But it was, and I guess it's kind of rude. You go up to an area like this and you do observe the Amish. I mean, that's part of what you go to see. And I'm sure the Amish don't really appreciate that, but I'm sure they also value the tourist dollar that comes through. But you do observe the Amish when you see them because, well, it's Amish country and they're a little different, and you're kind of curious about their ways. So yeah, you do notice, how calm the Amish are compared to the non-Amish in situations like that. Yeah, but Dare Dutchman, yeah, they have really good food too. They have, if you go on a busy 3-day holiday weekend or something like that, there's going to be a line to get in. But it's definitely worth going into. We stayed at the Walhouse Inn on one of our trips to this area. That's also in Walnut Creek. And it's a newer hotel. I don't know, right now it's maybe, 5-10 years old. Probably not even that old. Probably it's not. I doubt it's 10 years old. It's a newer hotel. It's very modern, especially for the area. And they actually had a big sign out front several years ago. TripAdvisor named them one of the top 20 hotels in America. Just, through the reviews and everything, they got a ton of good reviews. And they were named one of the top 20 or so hotels in America, period. And of course, they, like I said, they had a big sign out front boasting about that. And we thought, well, we should give them a try. That's a pretty impressive thing to have. So we stayed there on one of our trips up to Amish Country. It is a sleek, nice hotel. We liked it a lot. But again, especially for this area, it's very, very, very modern. A friend of mine, John, who kind of lives in this area, he came over. They came over. We had dinner with them, and we took him up to see the room. And he really liked the hotel. He liked the fact that it was so slick and modern, and it wasn't going as much with the traditional. There weren't framed quilts up in the hallway and that sort of thing. They weren't being, they weren't going with the kind of traditional Amish decor. He really liked that. He thought it was something kind of unique and nice for the area. And it definitely is a nice hotel, and I would absolutely stay there again. But when I'm in this area, I want to do the Amish stuff. And the Carlisle Inn is just I like it a little bit more than I like Walhouse. But I like them both, though. And again, there's a lot of stuff in this area. Like I mentioned, Rebecca's Bistro and Dare Dutchman. Those are two great restaurants. Not just for this area, but period. Those are two great restaurants. And it's hard to choose between the two. Those are good restaurants anywhere. But it's the same with Walhouse Coffee and the Amish Donut Cafe place. There's just a lot of really good quality places, and it's hard to pick which one to go with. And that's kind of the deal with the Walhouse Hotel and the Carlisle Inn. They're both great. And I'm sure there's some other great ones in this area too that we just haven't. Well, we stayed at the Carlisle Inn the first time when we really liked it, and we've been sticking with it. Oh, and also with the Carlisle Inn, there's a little guy that has a little Amish guy. He does buggy rides. He's usually stationed out in front of the Carlisle Inn, and I think it might be like $5 a person or something like that. It's not expensive, but he'll give you a buggy ride up and down the road, and that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool experience. He was a really nice guy. I can't think of that guy's name either, but we did it once, and it was really cool. And we were gonna do it on this trip, but he wasn't there the second day we were around, and So we didn't get to do it, but that's a cool, unique experience. And speaking of a buggy, there's one right there. Oh yeah, and another thing that we haven't done in this area, kind of like with Gatlinburg. When you come to Amish country, there's shows. There's some musicals and plays, and there's like an Amish. I don't want to compare it to Hee Haw, but like an Amish variety show kind of theater event, and I've seen them advertised, and we just haven't done any of them yet. I'm sure we'll get around to it, but we just get busy, and that's one of the things we just end up not doing. And I'm not a very politically correct person in general. I'm not overly PC. You want to be aware of being culturally sensitive, when the time is right. You know, I, a lot of those theater performances and stuff are obviously not Amish people, but people pretending to be Amish people, in play productions, and I don't know. I'd still pay money and go see it, though. I just haven't yet. But yeah, they have those, and the plays actually look interesting. I know when we've been there the last couple of times, they've advertised a play called Josiah for President. And yeah, that title alone kind of has me intrigued. Like, yeah, I want to go check that out. This is, I don't know, just a really attractive area. We've passed several buggies here, as you can see, and some other people on bikes. And I just think this is really attractive through here. But yeah, we haven't gone to see any of the plays or the performances or the theater kind of things. And I know when I lived in Cleveland for 10 years. We would come out to this area, to get away from the big city, as I've mentioned before. But I know some of the local music clubs would have kind of Amish parody bands. I know there was a band called the Electric Amish. I don't think any of the performers in those bands were actually Amish, but I think they dressed the part of being Amish and, would do, like AC/DC covers, but they would do them with like a Dutch accent. I never went and saw those bands, so I'm not really sure what they did. I just kind of assumed that was the kind of thing they did, but... Oh, and yeah, we just went by a nice restaurant over there. I can't think of the name of it, but we've been there before. It's a Chalet in the Valley. Anyway, this is a cool area too, and again, just fun driving through here and seeing everything. I know we were at the there's a candy shop right by the Carlisle Inn, and they had little Amish people suckers. They had a mouse. You could get a sucker with like a little chocolate mouse on it. You could get a sucker with a bird or something on it, and then they had little suckers that were little chocolate Amish men and women. Yeah, again, with the wave of political correctness going on right now, the Cleveland Indians are talking about changing their name, which I thought that would never happen, ever. Just, with the tradition of that team and that team's name, I just thought that would never happen. But I'm certain now that it will happen. Is it correct to have little chocolate Amish people suckers? Is it correct to go to theater performances of people pretending to be Amish? Just something to think about. And I kind of feel like those things will be addressed at some point in the near future, but I don't know, though. When I've encountered Amish and talked to them, they just don't seem easily offended. I don't think they care what other people say about them. I just almost feel like they just don't care. They've got their thing going on. Whatever the rest of the world is doing, I think they're just kind of like, meh, whatever. So, to their credit, I think they're very, they just don't care. Anyway, that's the impression I've always gotten. I wanted to go back to the Amish, or I'm sorry, the Yoder the Yoder's Amish home that I mentioned earlier. That's again something that you should do on your first trip out to this area. They're friendly. They've got a lot going on. It's a lot of fun. And they also have this thing. I forgot to mention this earlier, and it hit me how much I like this myself. They have a little kitchen in the home. And kind of at the end of your house tour, they take you down, and they have young Amish ladies making just all sorts of treats. And they have, just little pastry items that they've made there at the house that day. You know, like they haven't been put in a refrigerator or anything like that. They've been making them right there that day. And they have really good, like fried apple pies. You know, they're kind of individual ones, but they are so good. And that's kind of a big thing in Amish country, I've noticed. Like, I had one at their Dutchman on this trip, the fried apple pies. I know out at the end of the common store in Mesopotamia, they sell those too. But at the Yoder Amish home, they actually have, like I said, the girls making all sorts of things to eat. And that's one of them. That's one of my favorites. And I know in the past they may have changed things up a little bit with everything going on now. But in the past, just basically at the end of your tour, they kind of let you and your group loose in this room with all these great pastries, and they have individual prices on them, and it's on the honor system. You take what you want, and then you pay when you're done, and there's not a cashier or anything like that. So they just they trust you, and they even have a little thing where you can make your own change and that sort of thing, which is kind of cool. But I really like those fried apple pies. They're just really, really good, especially when they're made right there. That's, like I said, we've done that tour a couple of times anyway. That was a big part of going back the second time, was making sure we got one of those little fried apple pies. And they have animals out on that farm too. I know they had some little really sweet little cats that kind of roam around, and one was eating my there's a little person pushing their bike up the hill. I've been there. Man, they've come a long way though. Look at that hill. I've noticed too. But they have these really sweet cats, and they're just really pleasant and really sweet, like I said. And they came over and helped me eat a little bit of the crumbs from my apple pies. Noticing that person on the bike just a moment ago, I've seen a lot of Amish riding bikes, especially on this trip, and they have, it looks like some sort of little motor on their bicycles. They're pedaling and they're going, but I've seen a lot of them that have some sort of little motorized thing on their bike. I assume it's motorized. It looks like a black box that's helping them with their pedaling and all that. That's something else too with the Amish. They, depending on which group of Amish you're with, they have different rules and regulations. So it seems that not all of them are totally against using a computer or watching TV if one is on, or even having a cell phone. Each individual little church kind of makes up their own rules about that. So different sects and different groups have their own little practices as far as that sort of thing goes. Again, going back to my wife, I know when they lived in Mesopotamia, there were some Amish that would come over and help with things around their house, or some other things. Oh, and we're back in Berlin. I don't know if I mentioned that or not. And I'm gonna put up another video on Berlin, but there's a great antique mall right there. I've had some good finds there, and we're kind of overshooting. We're about to turn around, I think, but we're overshooting the main drag in Berlin. But this is and this is kind of after hours. This is after everything's kind of closed down. We decided to go and hit the ice cream shop up here in Berlin. That's really, really interesting. But yeah, the Amish people that would come over and help them with some stuff around their house. I know there was one in particular. I think she liked to come to the house at a certain time of the day because there was a certain soap opera that she liked on TV. And they didn't have their own TV, but I think if it was on while she was at someone else's house, she could watch it. So So there was that. And also I know, I mentioned that my late father-in-law was a Methodist minister. I know he would show, sometimes he would show like a movie, like a religious movie, and the Amish wouldn't come. I don't think they could come inside the church, but he would project a movie on the side of the church, and if it was outside, I guess they could technically go and watch a movie that way. So they have different sets of rules. I know that they're big right now. The Amish are really big into solar energy too. You'll see solar energy panels here and there. And again, I plan on putting another separate little video up on Berlin, Ohio, but we're in Berlin, Ohio right here. And I can't think of the name of it at the moment, but we're about to go into a little shop. We're actually leaving that shop now, that has really good ice cream, and they stock like 200 different types of regional pop. And I thought that was pretty cool. They had L81, which is big here in Kentucky. I didn't try any, though, while I was there. I'm trying not to drink as much pop these days as I used to. And up here, there's this particular evening, they were having music on the square, which obviously attracts a pretty good crowd. And and this guy was doing 70s covers, which that's kind of my thing. I would have liked to have heard some of that, but we wanted to go see more of the Amish and more of Berlin and Sugarcreek and Walnut Creek. So we didn't stick around for that, but this is a really nice little area right through here, just driving around. Very pleasant. This is obviously away from the Amish homes, but it's still a neat area with just lots of interesting shops going through here. Yeah, anyway, I think that's about it for the moment. Check out my blog, KentuckyTravels.blogspot.com. Thanks.